Are we ready? Ron?
Ron.
Okay, folks, so welcome to this edition of the Cemetery Board. I'm Dan Shapiro. I'm Secretary of State. Stacey Morales is designee as chair.
And I'm Christopher Wiles, appointed by Attorney General Schneider.
Now, Bob had to beg off. He had a conflicting engagement, so he's not here. That's why we have such a light agenda. No, that's not true, actually, but it's coincidental and fortuitous because, of course, if any issues come up of import, I prefer to have the whole board here, but I don't see it happening today.
You go first.
No.
You always go first.
No, I never do.
Then I'm hallucinating. Louis Polishuk, Director of the Division of Cemeteries.
Chet Butkowitz, Assistant Director, Division of Cemeteries.
Glenn Breen, Investigator, Division of Cemeteries.
Suzanne Russell, Clerk, Division of Cemeteries.
Joe Ambrose, Associate Accountant, Division of Cemeteries.
Tony Melillo, Counsel to the Cemetery Board.
There you go. I don't know who goes first.
But see, you report to the board directly.
Yeah, all right. We could have this philosophical conversation later.
Well, if we're going to have a philosophical conversation, we have an empty chair. I think we have to try some Gestalt therapy.
That's good. I like it. All right. It is a very short agenda, unusually so. In fact, the shortest agenda I can remember ever.
Agreed.
That's amazing.
Yes.
But I imagine that next month we'll probably have a bunch.
15 feet.
Yeah, okay. Well, in any event, Chris, have you had a chance to look at the minutes?
Yes,
Any
I'll move to
comments?
accept the minutes. I have no comment.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Legislation and regulation, Mr. Melillo.
Okay. There was some activity since our last meeting. Let's see. The very first item is third page, number 8, Senate Bill 3307-A. Actually, this is just an amendment. Amended in the Senate and the Assembly. No other action. So that's minor. Next action. 2 new bills. I think one of them we actually did talk about but didn't make into the report. This is number 20. This bill would amend the EPTL. This is Assembly Bill 9303 and Senate Bill 6938. Would amend the EPTL and NPCL to add a definition of community foundation and to allow such foundations to be custodians and trustees of cemetery trust funds. They've just been introduced in both chambers and no action.
Okay.
The next, number 21, is Assembly 9457, Senate 7105. This is one we've been expecting. Amend the NPCL Section 1506 to permit cemeteries in Nassau County to use for burial purposes adjacent or contiguous land that they acquire with the consent of the Nassau County Legislature. So that odd provision that prevented our cemetery in Nassau County, Locust Valley, from acquiring land, they're trying to address it through legislation. No movement in the Assembly, but it has passed the Senate.
Okay.
In fact, rather quickly.
Good. Very good.
And that's pretty much it.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
Anything status of the rule?
We made changes to the draft based on the information we received on these installment sales. We're not ready quite yet to show it to the interested parties, but we're going to do that, I would say, well before the next meeting. So
Okay.
Hopefully we'll have it to present for the next meeting.
That would be good. All right.
Tony, how do these get off the list? When do they finally become dead?
When session ends. And then they pop up again next session with different numbers.
Right. Many of them, yeah. Mr. Polishuk.
I have a few sort of random things to report. One is that we're going to be giving, one of the things we've been trying to do is get the word out more about what we can do to help people. NISAC is doing a couple of regional meetings, one here in Albany, one in Buffalo. There's one coming up in Oneonta. And we're going to be attending those. We're presenting, in fact. One thing that I need to try to do today is to speak to the Division of Local Government Services to see whether they think it makes sense to get the word out to local officials that we're doing this, and cemeteries are an issue that they should know a little bit about, and you want to come on down. It might be a little bit too late for the one in Albany, which is June 4th, but we have one in Buffalo on June 11th, and the one in Oneonta in October. So I think it would be useful to try to get some local officials, if they have the time, to come by.
I think Dee Dee would be more than happy to do some outreach. For
Is it Dee Dee or is it Mark Pattison?
either one.
Okay,
I mean, Dee Dee is the deputy.
right. Okay, so that's sort of thing number one, and something we've been working on for a long time. Thing number two, we've been getting increasing. We've been hearing anecdotally. This is the first one I've heard about. It's actually outside our jurisdiction, but I just wanted to flag this. We have a cemetery. I got a call from a religious cemetery in East Hampton, not under our jurisdiction, where they had acquired. My understanding is they acquired. I could be getting the facts wrong, but it doesn't matter for present purposes. My understanding is they acquired additional land that they want to use for burial purposes, and it's over. What the heck do we call it?
Aquifer Overlay District,
Aquifer Overlay District,
adjacent.
which is adjacent to the existing cemetery, and part of it is this new land is actually over this Aquifer Overlay District. The town planning board has proposed that the land could be used for interment only if the bodies are buried in aluminum caskets.
Aluminum, as opposed
To
Steel.
as-
steel, which will rust.
Steel.
Yeah, I understand.
right, as
Okay.
opposed to anything that would decompose, theoretically, to presumably keep anything from leaking into the aquifer. This being a Jewish cemetery, this is obviously not acceptable to them, because they ought to be using caskets that decompose or even less. So, I mean, the planning board hasn't rendered a final decision yet, but I think this is kind of illustrative of a problem that we've been hearing more about, problem from the cemetery perspective, that cemeteries are facing various different types of local zoning issues. And again, there's nothing for us to do here. It's not within our jurisdiction anyway, even if not entirely clear if this were a not-for-profit cemetery, what we would do. But
You know, it's reminiscent of, I forget which cemetery it was, but we've discussed where the police power of the municipality ends and cemetery's ability to effectuate its business begins.
and of course, we have a recent decision on the Mount Pleasant, the
Exactly
Oakwood.
right.
Oakwood?
That's what
Mount Kisk.
What's the cemetery called?
Mount Kisco.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's not
And
what the
that-
cemetery is called. It's
Right.
Oakwood Cemetery,
Yep,
Mount
Oakwood
Kisco.
Mount Kisco, yeah. And that's what I was referencing. We've had a lot of discussion. The board, or the division, I should say, because I think it was a council's letter, has written a letter that was part of the proceedings expressing our support for Oakwood in that particular issue. But it is a balancing act. I mean, there's no absolute right on either side.
I mean, to continue along the continuum a little bit further, Ferncliff Cemetery in the town of Greenberg has had all sorts of tangles with the town. But there, what they're doing is a little bit different. They are building, their main type of interment is in mausoleums. So that's a building.
Right.
And one could imagine that the town's jurisdiction over a building would be greater than its jurisdiction over something
The building code
else.
absolutely applies. You know, I mean, so, yeah, absolutely true. Now, whether you're dealing with the tree cutting provision, all right, which is, they're infamous, or over an aquifer, which, you know, the public health and safety issue is very clear there. I think you have to analyze it contextually. But in any event, yeah, it is a real issue. It's a coming issue. May one day have to be addressed legislatively. Yeah.
And the cemetery, Oakwood, is seeking leave to appeal to the court.
Right.
Have they sought leave? I believe they sought reconsideration in the second department and haven't actually filed a leave petition.
I believe they're going to do both.
Okay. Well, that would be the sensible thing to do.
Yeah.
So that's that issue. The other issue, which again there's no answer to, is I've had an inquiry from somewhere between 4 or 5 cemeteries in the last 2 months, where the situation is as follows: the cemeteries got new interments coming in, not huge amounts, but they're still in business. They have what they regard as a lot of money in the bank in their permanent maintenance fund, and yet they're either unable to generate sufficient revenue, interest, or dividends. In some cases, they're unable to generate sufficient interest or dividends to pay their expenses solely out of that, and don't necessarily have much money in their general fund. Or in another instance, they're able to, but they believe that they're being forced to adopt an investment strategy that doesn't make any sense, in that they have to put their funds into maximizing dividends and interest as opposed to maximizing long-term gain. That's one particular cemetery, which I think is financially stable, but they feel that the way the statute is phrased is making them invest in an irrational manner, given that in their own words, the cemetery is the ultimate long-term investor. Again, there's no answer to it. The legislation, the statute's pretty clear on what monies could or couldn't be used, but I know on Tony's list is a bill that would allow cemeteries to, without restriction pretty much, invade unrealized gain. And again,
Was that just for permanent maintenance fund, or was that a perpetual care fund?
the legislation,
Yeah,
I think it was for just
just
permanent
permanent
maintenance.
maintenance fund?
Well, perpetual care funds are a little different because those are actually true trust funds.
Exactly.
And they're subject to a whole, what is it, Article 5? Article 7?
Of what?
The not-for-profit corporation law. What's the acronym that I never can remember?
That's correct.
It's not the prudent, it's that, but there's another one. No, it's in the not-for-profit corporation law. It's the PFMIA or FPMIA
All
or
right,
something
well,
like
whatever,
that.
whatever it is, yeah. So,
But permanent maintenance funds aren't true trusts in that sense. So they,
okay.
the point being, this issue isn't going to go away, and we're kind of left working with trying to figure out ways for these cemeteries either to cut costs, reinvest, what have you, under the current legislative scheme.
Yeah, there are very few cemeteries that have permanent maintenance funds, which really will keep them in perpetuity. My perspective starts there.
On the other hand, I guess the question their response might be, yeah, but if we end up looking like crap sooner, we're going to be living solely, we're going to be running out of money sooner, as opposed to using a little bit of this money now to spruce up a bit and be able to have more sales now.
No, we've authorized, cemeteries have come before the board with requests for loans from the permanent maintenance fund.
But again, a loan is not going to be useful
Which
in
may
these
in fact be a
circumstances.
grant, because
Right.
the repayment plan is such that it doesn't get repaid. And the board, for certain projects, has been favorably inclined when it was clear that it would benefit the cemetery and extend its life. And other times hasn't been. Very contextual. Yeah.
There'll likely be an application such as that before the board next month. But it is challenging, and I guess 1507, as is interpreted by this particular cemetery, is kind of restrictive to them. The guidance that the division provides during audits and conversations with cemetery operators is to invest their funds to protect against inflation, which usually means going for growth and capital gains, but a balanced investment that also provides the highest interest and dividends possible. So it's not an all or nothing type of investment strategy. We do try to encourage them to think in a balanced portfolio.
Okay.
But as you just stated, a number of the cemeteries are struggling with the amount of PM funds to even invest and to help run the cemetery.
Of course, the problem with what Chet stated, and why I think this is more of an issue now than it used to be, is that you can't generate income as easily as you were in the past. It's easy, and you can still get capital gain.
Right.
It's challenging.
Okay.
We admit it's challenging, and probably more often today, currently we get calls from cemeterians, flat out asking why can't we spend the PM principal, and we have to reiterate reluctantly but firmly, you can't do it because you'd be in violation of the law.
Mhm.
And that it's there to protect the cemetery in the future, and
All right.
that's
well,
what they deal with.
You know, you have no problem taking a look at applications for loans as suggested, if that's a benefit to the cemetery. And if there's legislative proposals, we'll be reviewing them. But
We don't do a written policy or anything, we just
Well, we think the statute's pretty clear, so I don't know that there's
give
really
a
any.
standard letter you send.
It's not written policy. It's during an audit, typically, when we're face to face with cemetery operators, and we're getting an understanding of what their, revenue and expense streams are, and what their, combined assets are, what they have in permanent maintenance, and we try to give them guidance as to based upon what they currently have their funds invested in.
I think the real issue is if the cemetery were to come to the board to borrow from the PM fund for day-to-day operations, that would be a problem. Because that means the
Because they
cemetery's
can't pay
going
it back.
down.
Correct.
All right, because they're going down. And typically, the cemetery that will come to us for that doesn't have a large PM fund to begin with. So that is not the solution, and
Right.
invading the PM fund is not the solution. It could be the solution, all right, if the cemetery, if everybody knows that this cemetery has 5 years to go if they use up their PM fund, it could be possible that the board would say, all right, do it, all right? It's
Because
possible.
then what's getting handed over to the town will be in better shape than it would be if they didn't do the improvements.
As opposed to sending it to the town with the PM fund, which also may be, it's very fact dependent.
Of course, two of the
Right.
cemeteries we've gotten this inquiry about are in cities.
Yeah, well, there you go. Okay.
Solar panels.
And not, well, there's
Solar-
something. And not large cities,
Solar
not large
panels.
wealthy cities.
Our esteemed council is referencing a,
This thing,
Press
I should have made this
story
part of
that-
the
yeah.
report, but you
that,
do it.
Yeah, go ahead, Tony, it's very
This is
interesting.
good stuff.
Where
Since we
was-
have such
where
a
was
light
the
calendar.
cemetery? I think
It
it
was
was in
in
Rockville
Suffolk
Center.
County.
Suffolk County?
It was a
Okay.
religious cemetery, right?
Yes, it was a religious cemetery that
Different
is seeking permission to install solar panels on its
A
cemetery.
solar farm,
A solar
to
farm,
make a
yeah.
solar farm
Oh,
for
right.
sale of the electricity.
Not only the graves, they have an area they're not actually
Right.
using for interments now.
Right.
Fascinating.
So-
It brought to mind, I think, to all of us who, cell towers.
It's exactly the
Yeah.
same as cell towers.
Yeah, so,
Well, it could be windmills too.
Yeah, well,
Um,
although we're thinking, if city cemeteries could do this, because if towns can't, cities won't take them over versus towns.
Yeah.
Um,
but it is,
On a positive note,
Next,
I think there have
casinos.
been. Yeah. On a positive note, I think there have been, a couple of cases where, PM loan for operational purposes were granted, and it was sufficient time for the cemetery to correct their operations. So
yeah,
it's,
it is very fact dependent, as I said.
yep.
Yep.
All right.
Okey dokey. Anything else, Lou? Okay,
Well, I'll add it on after he does the vandalism report.
right, okay. So vandalism report. Very little collected, a whole lot of liability.
well said.
Okay.
But the liability hasn't really increased much since
No,
last
it
month.
hasn't.
No, this is true. For the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2015, vandalism fees collected were $5,811. Applications granted were none. And applications pending were $689,415.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes?
I didn't get you.
Oh, okay, so what I have to add to this is two things. Number one is, unfortunately, our efforts at finding a cheaper way to fix the retaining wall at Spring Forest
Oh.
Cemetery do not seem to have gone very well. And it looks like at least a third of that wall is going to have to be rebuilt. That's at least what their engineers are telling us.
That's large, isn't it?
Which, well, it was better than the whole thing.
Right.
But yeah, it's so cutting the thing down from 300,000 to between 50 and 100,000 is no longer
No, it's not
looking
gonna-
likely.
Okay.
We're going to have to probably send our engineer back there to talk to their contractors and see if they can brainstorm and figure out a cheaper way of doing this. But obviously, it makes, as much as it doesn't make sense to spend all of the state's money in one place, it makes even less sense to spend the state's money on a fix that won't hold this thing for as long as anyone can imagine going forward. I mean, that would just be
Yep.
craziness. So that's probably going to have to come back. And I've explained to the cemetery already that I don't see any way, given our annual appropriation, given what else might come in the door, we could approve this thing for one big payment. And they seem to be okay with that.
Mhm.
That they, their contractor seems like they can get a contractor to work for installment payments. But again, we don't know what the sum is, so it's a little premature to discuss it. I just wanted to flag the issue.
All right, flag it, and when it's ready to be vetted.
The second issue is we have a couple of abandonments coming in to towns. Mike was going to have one for the next meeting.
Okay.
They're not huge numbers. They're not but they're not tiny ones either.
That's what the fund is for. Very good. Thank you. Okay, this is remarkable. We've reached the end of our public agenda. So, at this point in time, I ask if anybody would like to address the board. Questions, comments? Saying hello? And can you introduce yourself, sir? For those of us who don't know you.
David Fleming from the New York State Association of Cemeteries. I just wanted to follow up on what Louis was talking about on the Suffolk County issue with the Jewish cemetery and the municipal intervention.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention that, just from my perspective, having represented this industry for a long time, it used to be, maybe I'd get a call a quarter or a call a month. The last couple of weeks, I've had at least 3 a week with municipal problems. And in this particular cemetery, they're looking for certificates of occupancy for the cemetery. It's
No mausoleums.
No mausoleums. They're in-ground burials, and they want certificates of occupancy. So I want to give. So
I have to be careful because
yes, it's being recorded.
Yeah.
So I want to give you a flavor for kind of some of the things that we've been fielding on behalf of our cemetery members, and it's becoming. And I will say the unfortunate part. It's unfortunate generally, but I think a lot of the cemeteries that are facing these problems are cemeteries that do not have the financial resources to defend themselves appropriately. They can't afford counsel, many of them, and are really at a loss. And certainly, they're reaching out to the division and to us for assistance. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention that it seems to be increasing and becoming more and more problematic, and the requests are becoming more absurd. And essentially, Mr. Chairman, you talked about the reality of the police powers of the cemetery board, which, from our perspective, having sued you all several times over your authority, it seems to be fairly well established by the courts that you have significant police powers. It is coming to the point now where there are municipalities, local governments, who are trying to prevent the operation of a cemetery. And that is a problem for us. Generally, we talked about this at our conference. I'm not sure, I know Mr. Polishuk was there at the time we were talking about it. And the Cemetery Association made a pretty strong plea at that point, which I believe we'll be following up with either in writing in person with the Attorney General, that given the fact that this is not a normal case, Mount Kisco and Oakwood, that they are essentially changing statutory language as well as the directives from this board by determining what they want a crematory to be and what they want a cemetery to be is a real problem, I think, generally for these struggling cemeteries around New York. We're going to face even more difficult times in the next 10 years. And as just your own numbers are showing, you've lost 5% of your regulated entities since 2003. Yep. We've got 2 more abandonments coming, shortly. I just took over a cemetery in my community. It's getting worse and worse.
Yeah,
So
I hear you.
I know you understand it, but I want to communicate it publicly so folks understand that it's not the sky is falling, the sky is falling.
Could you do me a favor, or do the cemetery a favor, that certificate of occupancy requirement for an in-ground burial? I'm not mishearing. An in-ground burial?
In-ground burial. Jewish cemetery, same cemetery.
Could you shoot Tony the name of the cemetery in the municipality.
Yes.
But it's an existing cemetery, and presumably all the people who've been buried there before do not have a certificate of occupancy.
There's a little matter of the building code to consider, and I have strong supposition that it's not within the code nor within the municipal local laws. And maybe we can have some reach out from our code folks on that, you know,
Right.
so.
Having dealt with the mausoleum issues previously, my concern then is we're going down the road to requiring sprinkler systems and caskets at this point. If we're going to get a CO for in-ground burials.
Thank you for that.
Means of
Mr. Fleming.
egress.
Okay. All right then.
I'm sorry, I had one more thing to add for the division
No,
report that I
not your
forgot.
turn. No.
Do I have to make a point of information or something? We will be, within the next week or so, getting out guidance to all cemeteries through
Yes,
some
yes.
means on the basics of what they were going to have to do to comply with the Nonprofit Revitalization Act.
That's great. And in a more general way, the Division of Corporations will be providing information as well for the filing requisites, what can and can't be done. There are significant, as you know better than I do, and you know, Tony, substantial changes. I think salutary, very, very good changes for not-for-profits generally in terms of filing and for the administrative entity that takes those filings. So we're looking forward to easier sailing in the future. But we'll have some guidance out from a couple of different. Thanks for working on that, Louis and Tony. I think it's a really good product. Not quite ready yet for distribution, but it will be.
Pretty
shortly.
close.
Yep. Okay. Yes, sir.
Not to delay you, but I wanted there to be a good enough break between my last comments and these. David Fleming from the town of Nassau. I wanted to separate.
See, that's why I started talking. Yes. A break.
I've already had a discussion with Len. I just want the board. You hear a lot of the bad things that are happening. I want you to hear quickly something positive. We came before the board on an abandonment,
Yes.
Brainerd Cemetery, and thanks to the board, nearly $30,000 was provided to the town for the restoration of that cemetery, which is in serious danger of being destroyed from dead trees and everything. It was on a main road and it was very visible. And we were unsuccessful in getting anyone else to take over the cemetery, including the village in which it's located. The town stepped in, and the impact, you need to understand, we actually issued a press release yesterday in thanking the cemetery board for your efforts and this program, because the impact for the community has been tremendous. We received a number of contributions, $1,400 for a historical marker, which is now on the roadside. The fencing, the trees are down. The cemetery is in the midst of $12,000 in complete stone repair and uprighting from an expert who's doing a phenomenal job, to the point now that, and because of the survey monies that were associated with that abandonment, we discovered a 100-foot strip of burial plots that had never been utilized outside the cemetery. And we've already been approached on several occasions by people interested in interment in the cemetery. So we've gone from an abandonment and an eyesore to something that is, the village has even complimented the town on how beautiful it looks, and it's going to be operating again.
That's wonderful.
So thank you for your efforts. I know sometimes these are difficult decisions to make, but they do have a positive impact, and certainly in a community like that, right on a main road, where it's very visible, it's had a real impact. So,
That's great.
thank you.
Is it
Thank you.
administered by the town now?
It is now. It's
So
no town property.
any monies received go to the town?
Yes.
And then any money spent come out of the town?
And we've had so much interest, yes, because we have separate funds. There were no funds associated with this takeover. There were other cemeteries, which yields about $14 a year.
Yeah.
But as a result, people have been so interested in the restoration of the stones that the town announced at our last meeting that we created a Veterans Monument Restoration Fund so that we can actually start restoring the stones in the cemeteries that we already operate, that we had to take over, that they never applied for abandoned cemetery funds.
That's great. That really is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to hear. All righty. Anybody else? All right, so what we will do is I'll be making a motion to go into executive session. We'll come out of executive session whenever we do, and then we'll adjourn unless there's other things to talk about. I doubt there will be.
I'll
Before
second
that,
the motion.
okay, yep, very good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And, but after we do that, we should just set the date for the next cemetery board meeting,
Oh,
so
yeah,
folks know
I'm
what
out
it
of
is.
town then.
Yeah, I have a couple weeks, a couple days I'm gonna be on vacation myself.
Okay.
Although I'm on vacation in Cooperstown, so I guess I could wander over here for it.
Cooperstown.
That's where the
Great
president
place.
is today.
Yeah, I heard.
Should we resume? the
Stay a hell
Thursday?
away, the traffic's gonna be terrible.
Go back to third Thursday?
I love that if.
The
we
third
do it.
Thursday, I believe, is one of the days I'm on vacation. Let me just check. Hold on a sec. Hold on.
I'm out that day.
Actually, you know what occurs to me, since Bob isn't here, maybe we should just do it by email
Email.
anyway.
Okay.
Could we do a
because-
tentative and see if he can do
The
it?
fourth Thursday is what? That would work for
Any
me.
day you guys want.
26 would be okay?
That's fine by me.
All right, let's see if Bob can do the 26.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
All right. So why don't we just then take a 5-minute break, then we'll go into executive
Can
session?
we make it a 2-minute break? Because Chet and I have a meeting at 11:30.
That's why the agenda is so short.
Yeah.
I figured it out.
No, we
You guys
scheduled that
jelly-rigged
meeting at
this.
11:30 because the agenda was short.
All right. All right, we're back on. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.